My name is Tony Thalen, she, her, hers. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and Parent Engagement at Macalester in Career Exploration. And I want to welcome you all to Curious About Careers, Science, and Lab Research. So we've got a really great panel of MAC alums here, ranging class years, ranging careers. This is really meant to show all of you the kind of range of careers that you can have when you're interested in a career community. So I think a lot of people get caught up in, I have to do this one career if this is my major or if this is my career community, but really people go so many different directions and find all these really cool jobs. So we wanted to show you all that. And students, if at any point you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat. You could also use the raise your hand feature. And then if possible, we would ask that you turn video on for this event. If that's not possible, totally fine. But it just makes it for a little bit more of an engaging experience for everyone. So, all right, we will kick things off. Aman, you are showing up first on my screen, so I'll have you do your intro.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Aman. I use he, him pronouns. I am a fifth-year PhD candidate at the University of Minnesota in the biochemistry department. And my research, because that's all that I talk about, is on looking at how microbes, specifically bacteria and fungi, make all of the coolest, weirdest molecules known to man. So trying to understand what enzymes do to be able to make those kind of molecules.
Very cool. Thank you. Jennifer?
Hello, I'm Jennifer. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a research technologist at Mayo Clinic. Specifically, I just transitioned from a job in a core laboratory working on tissues, and now I'm in a research-focused immunology laboratory looking at B cells and how they basically are created from the stem cells in bone marrow.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Soo-Kyung?
Hey everyone, I'm Soo-Kyung. I'm a first-year graduate student at University of Minnesota at MyCap program, which is for microbiology, immunology, and cancer biology. And I'm hoping, since I'm just a first year, I don't have a lab chosen yet, but I'm hoping to be under immunology track, studying the relationship between the T cells and autoimmune diseases or inflammatory diseases. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Diane.
Everybody, I'm Diane Saber. I actually did my PhD at the University of Minnesota in the microbiology department. Worked on bacteria that degrade xenobiotic compounds or difficult to degrade compounds. My career now, after going through working in hazardous waste degradation pathways, bioremediation, I then branched into working in systems for producing renewable natural gas to the pipeline grid. So I work on systems that now allow for bacteria to degrade organic compounds, produce methane, and that methane can be used. So it's renewable gas. I own my own company too.
Great, thank you so much. And students, if you would be willing to drop in the chat your name and your major pronouns if you'd like, just so we kind of know, and your class year, just so we kind of know who's here. You definitely don't have to, but if you want to drop that in the chat, that would be kind of nice for everyone to see as well. So I am going to kick off the first question here. And the first thing that I'd love to know is, of all the careers that you all could have chosen, what made you interested in this career community, but then also your specific career within this career community? So any panelists, go ahead and jump in when you're ready.
So I'll start first to help Tony out. So I've been, with your career, with all of our careers, including all of those that are on the panel right now, it evolves. It evolves based upon what you do, what the future holds, and the way you direct it. So the career that I have right now, the company that I have right now, didn't exist when I went to University of Minnesota. It didn't exist when I went to MAC. So that's the most important thing, is that you follow your own true North Star and pursue areas of interest that you like, keeping in mind there's going to be a lot of stuff you'll do that you don't like. And that's almost more important to discern than the things you do like. So from my perspective, I to be honest, I kind of created the environment that I'm in right now. I just kept pushing and pushing on a variety of different areas. And the whole space of renewable energy right now has been created by a handful of people. I'm really proud to say I'm one of them in renewable natural gas. So, but that didn't exist when I went to Mac. So it's evolving. So you don't think about what you're going to do for a job today. You think about where you would like to go. And I always say, try to look for the headlights of the train way before anybody else, and that'll really help you.
Yeah, so for me, I definitely ended up where I am. It has been like a really growing process after I graduated. So I graduated with the goal knowing that I wanted to start directly applying what I had learned in a more industrial type field. So I didn't want to go right into grad school or do anything like that. But that's how I ended up in a core laboratory, where I used any laboratory work that I had learned and any biology work I had learned to try to help as many people as possible. So I was working on tissue staining for clinical trials. I was staining tissue for multiple PIs. And after doing that for 2 years, I realized that I actually missed working on a continued experiment. And that's actually why I transitioned to the job I'm at now. And I have a better idea after doing that job for 2 years of actually what I want more in my future career path, which is what happens. You grow and you evolve and you get a better idea of what you want and what your future will hold for you. And you get experience in that area. So I wouldn't trade what I did in the PRC for the world, because it taught me so much and I met so many people and I made so many connections and I learned a very important part of science. And it was something I genuinely wanted to do. But now I am where I am now, and I have a much more defined idea of what my future career is, which is I'm pretty sure I want to eventually go to grad school and do something to do with pharmacology, immunology research in the pharmaceutical program, which is totally different than what I had going out of work. But that's part of growing and doing work.
Yeah, I think I can piggyback off of that. So I had a similar experience in that after Macalester, I decided to do a research tech position for about a little over a year. And I think the way to think about that would be like they say the dose makes the poison. And so I'd done like part-time undergrad research. And that was great. I enjoyed it. But again, I wanted to make sure that that was something that I could do 40 to 60 hours a week. And that's pretty important. And so there seems to be a trend with looking at current grad students that are now starting in various programs, that they do have some kind of experience. And I think programs are looking for that as well. Just like how do you know that you're sure you want to do this? And by no means does that mean that you cannot do those programs directly from undergrad, but really it's about like finding like optimizing the like match quality with what you really want to do. So given how I did things, I think that was a good way to do it, and I would recommend that for others as well.
I had a very similar experience with Aman. I graduated from Macalester in 2018 and I majored in biology. I did some summer undergraduate research program on campus. I did like a research throughout the semester as well. And when I graduated, I knew that this is something I really like. I like working in the lab, doing experiments, analyzing data, but I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to go into grad school. And since I've only had very limited exposure to a certain field in biology, I wasn't sure which field or like subject I want to study in grad school. So I started working at R&D Systems in Minneapolis to just get a feel of what that's like, working in industry. And I really liked working there and working in an industrial lab setting. But after a couple of years, I've realized that my exposure to science and biology in general in that team and in that company, especially as a person who doesn't have a PhD, was very limited. And I, by the time after like working for 3 years, I knew that this is absolutely what I want to do. I want to work in the lab and I can do this for 40 to 60 hours a week. So then I applied to graduate programs and I ended up at University of Minnesota.
Thank you all for your answers to that first question. Students, does anyone have anything that they would like to ask either through the chat or through the raise your hand feature? If not, I can jump to another pre-planned question that I have. Sarah, go ahead.
I'm interested, and thank you all for being here. I'm interested in like how you each, because I think most of you either have or had a research tech position after graduating college. So how you found those positions? Did you use LinkedIn, company websites, connections? And then also, I'm also interested in like the exposure, like exactly what you gain from those positions. Like if you, some of you talked about like it made you realize that you want to continue doing research, but also just sort of more of like what you did at that time, like how independent you felt, or was it more like your boss told you to do this and that's what you did? Thank you.
Yeah, I can jump in. So that's a really good question and something that I would also be thinking about. So for me, for my undergrad research, I first tried to find like an internship with a Mac professor, but I mean, spaces were limited. I was not able to get a position with a Mac professor. And so I was like, where else are there research labs? And the answer for me was the University of Minnesota. There are a ton of research labs. So what I would recommend is reach out to those professors. For my stint here at the U, I wasn't getting paid at all, but it was so totally worth it. So consider if that is something that you're able to do, and just look up as many professors as you can and try and get an idea of like this sounds fun. I might want to know more about this, or like that's definitely not something I want. And you will find at least a dozen professors that are doing very exciting research that you want to be a part of. And keep in mind that initially, as like if that is your first lab research experience, a lot of it is going to be grunt work, but that quickly changes. And to get more directly into your question about how did you find those tech positions, I worked with a senior graduate student while I was in undergrad, and when I got close to graduating, I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm going to be looking for jobs, but like if you come across anything, please let me know. And he said, well, I don't have anything in mind, but there's a new professor that just started working on the same floor, and I don't think he's taking anyone on, but I can introduce you. And so I just had a meeting with that professor, and he didn't have any openings for a tech, but we met and something clicked, and he was like, all right, I'll take you on. And so I guess the answer is networking, like just talk to people. But if you do a good job in your undergrad, I know a lot of people that did undergrad research with a professor and eventually ended up in their labs for a PhD program or something like that. Because if you do a good job, professors are always looking to take on people that they can rely on, and they know that before they're given a full-time job. And so I would say that's your in. It's almost guaranteed to work.
I want to add on to what Aman just said. Well, first of all, when I got my research associate job at R&D Systems, it was just through the company website. I don't really know anyone at the company, but I just got lucky because my undergraduate experience was pretty like relevant to what my previous team was doing. But getting as an undergrad, getting a summer research experience and internships are very challenging, especially when you don't have, as a sophomore or as a junior, if you don't have any prior experiences in the lab. And so I would really like to highlight what Aman just said, like just if you find a lab that it sounds like it's doing something interesting, you can volunteer, like, and just, go in a day in a week, and then just, obviously you'll have to do some grunt work, but they'll just like put your foot into the door and then expose you to what the labs are doing and get to know the people and just basically, yeah, get you inside the door. So I would really recommend doing that. And I really love being at Macalester, but one of the I guess the cons is that it's a small school, so there's not many labs available. So U of M is like a great school to look for the labs you'd be interested in.
Yeah, for me, I was able to do, I got my job by applying. I actually met an HR person at a disability and resource fair. That was really helpful for me. But I ended up applying to a bunch of jobs. And what I would do is I would surf websites, I would just apply to all these jobs, and I would follow up with people pretty regularly. And if I could, I would try to find anyone who knew anything about the jobs to see if they had any hints or any advice, to just find anything that I could do that would be better to help me get the job. And so that's how I ended up at Mayo, which is where I work now, is because I found an HR person who was really helpful in helping me just know a little bit more about Mayo culture, which would help me just with things like a thing to write on my cover letter, or a thing to write, say, during an interview process, which just helps get your foot in the door. And with things like doing an REU, I followed up a bunch of times with the people after I wrote it. If I felt like they weren't responding, I would follow up and say how interested I was in their program. And that helped me get into an REU at UW-Madison, just because I would repeatedly follow up and talk about how interested I was in what the programs
offered. I'll add a couple of sentences here. So my pathway is one that is not so linear. I graduated from Mac, double major in biology and geology, and I went to work immediately for the energy and energy industry. And I ended up getting an MBA and doing a lot of sales in science. I went sales because my family does a lot of sales. And then I decided I really wanted to go back to explore, as I said, microbiology and microbial ecology. But I went back to graduate school because I loved it. And those who go back through that pathway, that's not everybody's pathway, right? It's really hard. And you do it first because you love it. You don't do it because you want to get a great job. You've got to, So I suggest, especially if you're questioning, and there was a question about, is research right for you? Actually, I don't like research, but I really like microbial ecology. So what I ended up doing was taking the MBA and weaving it with the knowledge that I learned as a graduate student, but I didn't want to do bench. And I went back out and did something else after that. So I wove the two together. I have a daughter right now who's in the same position. She's a chemistry bio major. She didn't want to do research. She didn't want to sit on a lab bench. I totally get it. So what she's doing now is public health with a focus on epidemiology. She went into the Peace Corps. She loves working with people, and she blew it out on that side. So don't think that, because I'm a bio major or I have to go to grad school, I have to. There are different pathways you could go that you could be really happy with and rewarded and not lockstep. And I think those of you that are just into graduate school or entering it are going to agree that you're finding a lot of students who are questioning whether I should be here in that first or second year because they didn't know what else to do. So they went to grad school. And that's not the reason you go to grad school. You go to grad school because you really love it. So that just make sure that you look sideways instead of feeling you have to drive it forward, because I think you're going to be a lot happier.
Thank you. So Diane, you started kind of answering this question a little bit. I wanted to open it up to the other panelists too. We have a question in the chat. This student is wondering if there were any points in time where you questioned if getting into research was a good fit for you. And if so, how did you work through that?
Well, the moment I left Mac, I didn't want to do basic research. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do industry. I wanted to do something where I was doing lab work because I knew I liked that, but I didn't want to do anything super basic researchy. Like I wanted to be at a bench doing benches stuff, but not like intense research that I felt to me was disconnected from the world. So I completely feel that, but then, so that's where I was. And then I also felt like it was disconnected from a lot of things that were really important to me. And that's why at my current job, I'm really connected to EDI work, so education, inclusion, and diversity. I have to do that as a side project because otherwise I feel like some of the research I do get really isolated from some of the stuff that matters going on in the world. But after doing like semi-clinical lab work where I was analyzing tissue, doing to clinical patients, I realized that I missed it. And that's how I realized that it was a good fit. It's because I was like, oh, I'm doing some work that's like the bench work I enjoy, but not super researchy, not very experimenty, not anything that a PhD would do. Not any basic research like I'm doing right now with mouse models. And realizing that I missed some of that components is how I realized that research was a good fit for me, if that makes sense. And incorporating other points into a side part of my life, essentially.
So I just wanted to emphasize what Diane said, because I know like a lot of us on the panelists today has a PhD or are working towards a PhD degree, but I've realized that there's so many things that you can do with your bio major that does not have to be PhD. And when I was an undergrad, when I was a senior, the only pathway I knew was either going to grad school or getting a job in industry, because no one would tell me that there are other ways or other things you can do with your major. And so I did get a job in industry after graduation, but during the first year or two while I was working, I tried to venture out to many other career paths that I can possibly go to. One thing I did was to take a class at Macalester as an alum, because you can audit a class this semester. And luckily they were offering this class on patent law for biopharmaceuticals companies. And I took that class, which was really interesting, but from that class, I knew I did not want to be a patent lawyer. And then I took this class just online on computer science and coding, because I didn't have any prior experience to that, which was also really fun, but I could not see myself sitting computer all week coding and developing softwares. And then I took this online class on virology, which was a class I didn't have the chance to take at Macalester. It was cool, but not something I could see myself doing all week. And then I went to multiple poster sessions and presentations at work. Whenever we hire new scientists, they talk about their research. And the more I work at industry at R&D systems, I just knew that I missed what I did back at Macalester, which I worked with Professor Chatterjee in her immunology lab. So I realized that I missed doing that, and I could do research 60 hours a week. And and that's how I knew that I want to go back to research and I want to be in grad school.
Yeah, I had a couple of things to say. So first, I'm just going to make a quick plug for this book. I don't know if that shows up right, but it's Career Opportunities in Biotech and Drug Development by Toby Friedman. If you're at the stage that you're at, this book would be super helpful. It talks about everything that you could do with like I guess a biology-ish undergrad degree and what you can do after that. I'm just going to share this real quick. And so this is like a little schematic of like what directions you could go. And everything in red is bench research positions. And everything that's not in red is things where you would likely not have any sort of like bench work involved. And so you can see that bench work is really a very small part of it. And yeah, various people mentioned like law, like patent law, you could go there, you could go regulatory affairs. Diane mentioned sales, like it's all on here, and there's a very wide variety of things to go for. So I just wanted to show that I would highly recommend getting that book, especially if you can get that at Macalester. But keep that book. It talks about what it's like, what a day in the life of XYZ is, what you can expect out of a job like that, how much traveling there is. Can you have a family if you have a job like that? What's the salary range? What are the pros and cons of the job? What you might need to excel in that job. So there's that book. I would highly recommend you look at it. And the other thing would be to get to I think it was Michelle's question, yeah, just science is like a very different kind of job compared to most others, at least bench science, in that most of the time especially if you're in academia, I guess, is things are not going to work. That's kind of the nature of like discovery-based science. And so kind of getting used to that, and also not tying your self-worth to how your research is going. That's something that, especially if you go the grad school route, you're going to have to learn. I learned that the hard way. I guess everyone learns that the hard way, but yeah, like put in your best, and you're good. Do not expect that all of your science is going to work just because you did it as best as you could.
Thank you. Aman, could you put the book in the chat? Would you be willing to type that in there? Thank you. And then I see there's a few questions. One I want to address first, just so we can clarify some things as we continue the conversation. Would any of you be able to explain with the idea of doing research in general versus bench research? So we've alluded to it a few times, but just to clarify for everyone.
I think how I see it is bench work is whatever you do on your bench, on the lab, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're setting up hypotheses and you're setting up an experiment to see what results you get. And research is more like discovery based, to like where you like set up a hypothesis, but you don't really know what results you're going to get until you get the results. And so I would say like the work I did at my job at R&D Systems are more like bench work, because I ran a lot of ELISAs, but I kind of knew what the results are going to look like. There was a certain expectations to the results, and if they didn't meet those results, I would run them again. But the research I'm doing now at grad school, there's hypotheses, and like I'm expecting certain things, but I really don't know how it's going to turn out. And the results could be something completely different than what I was expecting. And it's the process of finding why that results have come out, and doing all of that. I think it's part of the research as opposed to just a simple bench work.
Thank you for that. All right, so that was super helpful. There is another question in the chat. This person says, I'm really undecided on what I want to do post-Mac, which I'm sure you are not the only one. How would you recommend approaching professionals that are in fields of interest to get more information?
My suggestion on that is to just ask. Literally, just ask. What do you do every day? What do you like? What don't you like? What are your interests? This kind of thing. Be more probative into the kind of person they are and the things they like and don't like, rather than what do you literally come in and do every day. Although that might be important, because once again, and I'll say this, and probably everybody on this group will know within the next 10 years that this is true, the careers that you think you have right now are going to change. Things are changing all the time. So you want to do is build a really good base of knowledge. And really, if there's anything that drives you, as the interest that you have in that base of knowledge, and then leveraging your creative and incredibly good ability, if you came from Mac, to have many things on your plate at once and weave them together. That's one thing that's a real differentiator. Also, you tend to probably be better verbally and written than most people. And that comes in really handy because when you take any topic, no matter how complex it is, I always say, what is your ability to make sure that your mother understands what you're talking about? Because that's the point. We have to get the knowledge that we have into accessible formats. And that's all of the skills that you've learned at Mac. So you've really been set up well. I just want to reiterate that. You've already got a leg up. You may not see it now, but you do.
I just want to add quick to what Diane said. You should ask people, ask professionals who are in the field, but you should ask Mac alums because they love helping Mac students. And so what I did as an undergraduate at Macalester was to go through the Mac alumni directory. I think it's called Mac Direct, right? And you will see a sign on alums who has like a heart sign on that they're more than happy to like help you and talk to you. So you could reach out to any alums or alums who have those like heart signs on. And another thing I did was I would go on LinkedIn. I would type in a company that I wanted to work for example, R&D systems. And then I typed Macalester to see if anyone who graduated from Macalester worked at the company, and then I would reach out to them.
Those are all really good tips. Sorry, Diane, I saw you
Yeah,
unmuted.
Seok-Young did a really good job in just describing essentially, you think your work is done once you graduated from Mac? No, you still have to do a bunch of research. You've got to keep working at that level of understanding both who you are and what's on the outside. And she's been doing a really good job of saying, and then I looked here, and then I looked here, and then that's exactly what it is. You've got to keep working.
Definitely. Students, anyone else have a question? Otherwise, I have one that I can ask. All right. So I would love to know, we talk about liberal arts education and the value, especially at Mac. How do you all feel? And you've kind of started talking about this, which made me think of this or want to go to this question. How did a liberal arts education prepare you for the role that you're in or the role that you want down the line?
I'll start that real quick because I did start it. What it did for me, you probably at Mac walk through Smales Hall or whatever it's called, that room. Well, Jim Smale was my professor, and in fact, he was my advisor. And he had this amazing ability to combine the right side of his brain with the left side. So he was both a really strong artist and he was a really strong scientist. And I think that if anything Mac allows you to do is explore that space. Use all of your talents, like fire on all cylinders. I think that you're at the University of Minnesota. I'm sure all of you at U of M are in school with kids who came through other universities who maybe had their undergrad in epidemiology, their undergrad in microbiology, and they're not as wide personality-wise, and just being able to blow out both that ability to be, as I say, verbal, written, and intensely good with a science background. And that's really, it's such a plus because that's where it's at, is integrating all information.
Yeah, I think there's one more. So Diane mentioned a whole bunch of things that are 100% spot on. I won't get more into those, but I think there's also the, I think what Macalester does through its like gen ed requirements is also kind of develop this like social justice bone in your body. And that's something that I didn't fully recognize or appreciate while I was still at Mac, but like after that, and I've been like really thankful for it. And it's not just like social justice in the sense of like you look at things that are bad and like treatment of people that's not so good, but even other things like I helped get like a composting thing set up in my building for a whole bunch of stuff that like lab, like you use paper towels for all sorts of stuff that don't have hazardous material, and that can be composted. Is that a big thing? Not really, but like is it still a good step in the right direction? Absolutely. I helped set up like a anti-racism workforce because I was talking to some people at another university, and turns out that my college specifically is not doing enough in this regard to even compare with other schools. So help set that up, and this again circles right back to what Diane was saying, with like, how do you do that? It's, well, it's your written skills, it's your like your ability to evaluate what's going on, not just in your work but also around your work. How are you dealing with other people? How are you interacting with them? Are you showing them that you can actually like do more than just like think about your next experiment? It all adds up, and I think the impression that people are left with after talking to you is that this person has something, and like maybe there's something special there that is really useful to have. And I think people in industry, if that's the route you're going, will see that. Or if you stay in academia, I think people will see that. I think you leave a very good impression, even if you might not know that you are.
Yeah, I want to second what Iman said, because you have to realize that when you're trying to find a job, you're obviously networking, and that doesn't end once you go out into the world with your job, and or even thinking about grad school or going beyond that. And a big part of me going to Mayo and me being in Mayo has been networking within diversity and inclusion groups and doing presentations within that and trying to raise awareness and create changes with LGBTQI representation and disability representation. And the majority of people that I've met and people that I've even networked with to just help me get places that I'm going even has been through those groups and organizations. And it's been because of talking to people and doing that outside work. And also the fact that I've come from Macalester means that I recognize that I'm a person outside of just doing STEM stuff. Like, I know who I am. I know what my awareness of the world is outside of just my life pertaining to research. I have a greater understanding of what's going on, and I'm able to talk to that about with people. And I think that applies to everyone here who's even questioning what they're going into. Like, maybe they want to talk about science and research instead of doing bench work and stuff like that. And having that awareness and that understanding and questioning is really important and something that Macalester fosters.
All right. I can jump in with another question. Students, feel free to keep typing them in the chat or go ahead and raise your hand and I can call on you. So my next question is, what is something that you did or multiple things that you did, whether that was take a certain class or work under a certain professor, or maybe you were involved in a specific student org. What were some things at Mac that really helped you narrow in and solidify what you wanted to do, at least right after Mac?
I can start. So my first year course was called Bodies on Fire, Inflammatory Diseases 21st Century. And that's when I first learned about inflammatory diseases, autoimmune diseases. And that's when I started taking interest in the field of immunology. And then I got lucky, and then I took this class called Research in Immunology my sophomore year at Macalester, which was very intense, very time consuming, but it was basically doing research during class. And it was so fun. And I kept pursuing that. So I applied for summer undergraduate research on campus with the same professor, which I had a ton of fun with. And that's how I knew I wanted to, at that point, I still wasn't sure if I wanted to commit to grad school, but I knew bench work and science is something I wanted to keep on pursuing.
I can say a little bit. So when I graduated from Mac, I didn't have anything in mind. I knew eventually I would probably go back to graduate school because I really love microbiology and I took 2 great microbiology classes, but I knew I needed a break. So again, my dad, who was in sales, said, why don't you go sell something for a couple of years? And so I did. And I learned, frankly, not a lot of book stuff, but I learned a lot about people and I learned a lot about myself. And I think that in the long run, I still treasure those things that I learned, all the good and all the bad, because there's not much that going back to graduate school, then they could throw at me that I hadn't seen before. And if you think the graduate school is just an extension of college, it's not. It's really, really different from college. It's just not going to class and taking tests. It's a lot of stuff about yourself. And I wouldn't have been as prepared had I not been knocked around. I went to New York City for 3 years and did sales. I'm from New York anyway, but still I got beat up pretty bad. And I really felt that regardless of the job, it was the experience. And that's the important thing. Take a great experience, learn a lot and keep moving.
Yeah, I would say one, like the classes that you take are a good indicator of like what you might want to do, in the sense of like, is there something that you find a little bit more fun or interesting? Do you find yourself going to office hours more with a certain professor because you're like, wait, I actually, like, I had a question about this. That kind of stuff is great. And also, I don't think outside of class, it doesn't matter too much what you do. You will find a way to use whatever it is that you do in what you do next. So like, for example, for myself, I was part of program board, and like I hosted events, like took care of buildings and like figured out, you know, like who's the person sitting in the back of like an event that's actually making all of the lights and sound and everything else work. And like now if there's an event that I need to organize, I know of like that one person that no one really thinks about or cares about, but I'm like, that person's really making this work. So like, go say hi to them, like, you know, like, hey, like, thanks for doing this. You get a good sense of how of what goes into making an event happen. And that would be true if you were doing something entirely different. It's like, I think the example is Steve Jobs taking a calligraphy course in undergrad, and how that was used to develop the keyboard that computers now have. It's exactly that same thing, maybe not as cool as what Steve Jobs did, but still, it's the same principle. You will find a way to use it in the future.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I went into Macalester with no idea really of what I wanted to do. And I took a weird variety of courses, and then I took, like, I think it was biodiversity and evolution, which has no relevance of what I'm doing right now, but I thought it was really cool. And I really enjoyed it. And I enjoyed dissecting things, and I enjoyed learning about extinctions. And then I was like, I guess let's go this way and spend some time doing this. And even now, I spend some spare time just being like, I think I spent some time last weekend with some of my friends looking up stuff about how first tetrapods came off the land. But like, as long as you maintain that curiosity and find things that foster that curiosity and expand your world experiences, you'll use that. And it's about finding those things and maintaining that passion for those types of things, and continuing to narrow in on something that you can continually be curious about and do things with for 40 hours a week.
All right, well, we have another question in the chat. This person says, one of the things I worry about with a career in the sciences is having a job or a research position with a narrow focus. Everything interests me, and I don't want to have to choose just one thing to give my time and attention to. Did or have any of you experienced this conundrum, and how did you manage it?
Yes, the answer is yes. And that's the cool thing, is that you're able to create your own reality in a sense. So my suggestion is to try everything. And I know that sounds silly, both try everything and remember everything, just like Aman was saying. There's going to be things that you pick up from different and really disparate career paths that will serve you usefulness. You realize the job you have coming out of Mac is not going to be your career for the rest of your life, right? It's a job. So what you want to do is sort of ratchet up from all of the job experiences you have into something that you really fits your body. It's the clothing that fits your body. And you do that by experimenting about what works. And so don't think of this first job out of Mac as, unless your driver, folks, is money, that's a whole nother gig, but that's, I think, not what we're talking about. If it really is finding something that fits you, experiment a lot. Take a job that doesn't seem exactly the way you want it. Give yourself a timeline, learn a lot, and take it to the next thing. Learn a lot, take it to the next thing. And eventually it'll come down. You don't have to narrow down. You don't. You're actually really wide. Look laterally right now. Yeah, you're doing fine.
Yeah, I think multiple people on this panel did exactly that, of like, just do a trial period. Like for me, that was a tech position. I think for Soo-Kyung also, that was an industry position to see. Diane has done work like in the workforce, gone back to school, done workforce, gone back to school. Like that's like, yeah, just being a generalist and as opposed to a specialist is, I think, important. And yeah, like the sciences do kind of want you to be a specialist. You could be a leader in one very, 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 very specific little thing. But if you think about leaders in any very specific field like that, you will find that, you know, they've been doing this for 30, 40, 50 years. And so they've come to that only with time. And like often if you read autobiographies of a lot of these people, they were doing completely unrelated stuff in their earlier years. So yeah, like try stuff. And if there's things that you don't like, just switch. I think as long as you're able to pay the bills, keep experimenting. I think for the first at least 2 to 3 years after your undergrad, do that. And then if you find like, hey, this is a little chaotic, I think out of these things I like this, do that. And again, in the future, that will change. I think my career path is absolutely undefined right now. I can do bench work, I can write, and that's about it. And I don't know where that's going to go next, but that's part of it.
I just want to say that I guess this is a tough question because if you are working towards your PhD degree and you're in a research lab, often your focus of your research is actually very narrow. But it doesn't, well, it is narrow, but you know, like just because I study T-cell and immunology doesn't mean it's only T-cell, because they're all connected. It could be something influenced by the gut microbiome. It could be something in the brain and the neurons, and it could be everything. Everything is connected. But so I would encourage you to like just try out, experiment many other things, just like I did, and how I went through the process of elimination. And even after you do all that, and if you still think you don't want to focus, or if you don't want to have a narrow focus, and if you want to do something like in a broader, like that touches on multiple topics, I'm sure there are jobs in science that will allow you to do that. For example, I told you I took this class in patent law. If you become a patent lawyer, you're working on multiple different projects, and it's not always going to be on one product. So maybe that could be a job that allows you to work on many different topics. Or I know a friend who also graduated from McAllister with biology, and she's a health company consultant. And that means she get to work with many different companies. I don't know whatever product they're working on, but it must be exposing her to many different projects and experiences. So you could look into those avenues and like we said, talk to Mac alums, see what they're doing, and find the job that will interest you.
Yeah, I just want to go off what Soo-Kyung said, because I know that there are jobs that are really narrow. My current job is really narrow. It's like B cell development. But every week I learned something about what another lab is doing. Like this last week, I learned about diabetes in pancreas and how there's a specific mutation that can cure, could provide a potential way to mitigate type 1 diabetes, which is really exciting. And that was very exciting for me to learn about. I just got to sit and learn about this new type of research that I hadn't learned about, which is really exciting for me. But then I have a friend down here who works as a clinical research coordinator. So works with multiple types of different clinical research, which is an entirely different thing that I work on. Very broad, what they want to do for the rest of their life. We're both working at the exact same company, but entirely different things. I was working on a pharmacogenomics project, and now I was working with patients receiving different treatments for CLL. So those types of things can be very broadly ranging, and there are, even in certain narrow fields, opportunities for growth, but you can always switch, you can always change. I just made a change. So you can always go for it.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm not seeing any other student questions in the chat. Panelists, if you would be willing, could you drop, and you definitely don't have to, but if you would like to make yourself available for students to reach out after the event, if you could put your email in the chat, that would be super helpful. And then students can take your great advice to reach out and learn a little bit more and talk with you a little bit more in detail if they would like. So I'm gonna we just have a couple minutes left. We're gonna put a link to a student eval in the chat, and then panelists, if any of you just have any last parting words of advice, feel free to jump in now.
I'll just add quickly, I guess just reiterate what I said earlier. There's so many career options you can go with your Macalester biology degree, and it's not just grad school or working in industry. So I really encourage you to go out there, try out different options, try to experience different things, whether that's taking a course online or talking to a Mac alum. Just try a bunch of different things and which fits you the best or interests you the most.
Yeah, I also agree with that, and really value all of the experiences that you've had at Mac, and experiences that don't even seem relevant to a career. And that can go from waiting on tables, just helping people, all the way across. You're learning the whole time. And as I say, try to see as many things that don't seem to be naturally connected. In your own mind's eye, kind of play a game and try to connect them. Because I personally don't believe sitting at a bench is linear. My own personal experience was I wanted it to make it the way that I wanted to make it. So I drove it the way that I wanted to drive it. And even with the most sort of stern professor or PI that you're working for as a graduate student or whatever, you can see a pathway that you can own. And that's the power of it.
One more thing that I would add is, so just really quickly, there's a study out of Harvard called the GRANT study. I don't know if any of you've heard of it, but it's one of the longest studies ever done. Like they followed people for 80 years and looked at everything about them. And their kind of a conclusion from all of this was what I think of as kind of the secret to life, but basically it's like embrace your community. That's something that Macalester really teaches you as well. It will help you find your next job, but it'll also help you stay happy and feel like there's some larger purpose to life. And so yeah, definitely keep your community close, whether that's family or friends, and that will be super helpful. That's something I try to do as much as I can, and I think you should too.
Yeah, I agree with this. Everything that everyone said, and the only thing I would say is, like, if you find that something you enjoy doing doesn't seem to be directly connected to a specific biology major, that's not a big deal. If it's something that you're passionate about, find a way to make it work. Find a way to get those connections and find a way to to find that passion and make that path work and incorporate that into your life.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. This was so helpful. And I know our students really loved hearing from you all. Yeah, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day and we appreciate your time. Bye.